I'm going to do a terrific show today, and I'm going to help people because I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
Hey guys, it's Miss Merck. I hope you're all doing really well today. Our learning goal is that students will be able to differentiate between literal and contextual interpretations of scripture. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at moral and spiritual, but today we're really going to be seeing what's different about these two interpretations, as well as what some of the risks are when we don't take them into account when interpreting the scriptures. So without further ado, let's get started. So just to recap what we've learned through our vocab so far, when we're talking about the literal interpretation of scripture, we're making an interpretation that is based on the exact words that are found in the Bible and what those words mean. On the other hand, when we're making a contextual interpretation, we're trying to figure out what the scriptures mean based on the background information surrounding the text, such as culture, politics, religious traditions, and the setting at the time in which the scripture was actually being written. We also learned last week how to identify examples of different types of interpretations. So just to recap that as well, some things that we can look for in an interpretation that would tell us that it's literal would be seeing phrases like because the words say or because these words mean. What we can look for to see if an interpretation is contextual would be something along the lines of because blank, or like because this religion or this happened at the time this was written. Any type of background information would key us in that that's a contextual interpretation. We also learned that Catholics typically prefer to use contextual interpretations. So why and when would we ever really use a literal interpretation? Well, I want you to start thinking of literal interpretations like a trampoline. With a trampoline, you bounce off of it to get to something higher. So you would bounce off of a literal interpretation in order to make better contextual, moral, and spiritual interpretations. So you can think of the literal interpretation like a trampoline, like you're bouncing off the literal, or you're bouncing off of what the words mean in order to reach a better contextual, moral, and spiritual interpretation. Another way to think of it is as a pyramid, with literal and contextual being at the bottom. You have to understand the literal interpretation because if you don't know what the words are actually saying and what they mean, you're going to have a hard time bringing the contextual background information to apply, and you're going to have a hard time understanding any morals or spiritual lessons being taught. Okay, so now we're going to look at an example of what these interpretations would look like. This is a conversation between Jesus and Peter where Jesus asks Peter, "Do you love me?" 3 times. And each time Peter answers with, "Lord, you know that I love you." We're going to be specifically looking at the word love and how a literal understanding of love is going to help us with the other interpretations. So as it was originally written, the original text uses different words of love. So Jesus asks Peter if he agape loves him, which means unconditional love. But Peter answers that he has a philia love for Jesus, which means a friendship love. So really, the exact words are, "Peter, do you love me unconditionally?" But Peter always answers, "Yes, Lord, I love you like a friend." Until the last time Jesus asks him, "Do you love me like a friend?" And then Peter says, "Yes, I love you like a friend." The contextual interpretation would be the background information, which is that they had different words and ways to say love. And that when this conversation was happening, just a couple days earlier, Peter had publicly denied Jesus. So Jesus is asking him if he loves him unconditionally, but Peter's feeling a little guilty because he's saying, "Well, I just love you like a friend because I just denied you, so clearly I don't love you unconditionally." Knowing all that information and what the word love actually means literally in this context, we can learn the moral that we should be honest with God, and we should always try to love him the best way that we can. And then understanding that information, again, leads us to a spiritual interpretation, which is that God will always accept us, no matter how much we love him or where we're at in regards to our love for him. So understanding the literal meaning of Peter, do you love me? And when Peter answers, "Yes, I love you," and understanding what those words literally mean when they say love, help us to reach a deeper interpretation for contextual, moral, and spiritual. There are a couple dangers when we're only looking at the literal interpretation, or when we're only looking at the words themselves. If we go back to that triangle, it's important to remember that the literal is the foundation of any other interpretation, because we can't really apply the context or think of lessons to be learned or think of what God would want to tell us if we don't actually understand what literally these words are and what the words actually mean. However, some risks, if we're only looking at the literal and not the other interpretations, is that we could modernize the Bible, which basically means looking at it only in light of modern times, which isn't accurate because it wasn't written in modern times. We all understand that words as they're defined today might have had different meanings 20 or 30 years ago. If someone said that my eyebrows were on fleek 20 years ago, I would have not understood what they meant. So we have to not modernize the Bible, but think of it in terms of its context of when it was written. Only looking at the literal can cause us to misinterpret what these words actually mean, which could lead us to reaching wrong conclusions in terms of morality, life lessons, and a wrong idea of who God is. So when we're only looking at the words, we run the risk of not actually understanding what those words meant at the time that they were being written, which could lead to misinterpretations like I had just mentioned. And if we're misinterpreting the scriptures, then we're misinterpreting who God is and what he wants for us and what he wants to tell us. So all misinterpretation should really be avoided, and we should use literal and contextual together. So again, lastly, just to kind of sum things up, we're differentiating between the literal and contextual interpretations of scripture, or recognizing what really makes them different. So what makes the literal interpretation different and unique is that it focuses on what the words themselves say and what the words themselves mean. So it's a very text-focused interpretation. On the other hand, contextual interpretations are focusing on what the background information is outside of the words themselves. So it looks at the greater scene behind the words that were actually written down. I hope this video helped you understand how to differentiate between literal and contextual, and also how the two of them together will help us make better moral and spiritual interpretations. Love you. Bye.